Hello, learning birds. This is Mr. Buffington, and today we're going to be learning about the literary device of irony. There are three types of irony that we're going to discuss. We'll talk about dramatic irony, which is when an audience knows something and the characters don't know it. There is a situational irony, when a situation is the reverse of what you would expect to happen. And then there's a verbal irony, the controversial type of irony, when the speaker says something and they mean the opposite. And we'll talk about all three of those today. Let's start out with dramatic irony. To talk about dramatic irony, I'm going to go to Shakespeare. Shakespeare was a master of dramatic irony. He made the audience know things that the characters in the play didn't know about. A great example of this is Romeo and Juliet. Juliet fakes her death and she's only sleeping. The audience or reader knows this, but then Romeo does not, and he thinks she's actually dead. So this creates a really dramatic, tragic ending because he thinks that she is dead. There's another Shakespearean play called Twelfth Night. This is a wonderful play. It's a comedy, so different than our tragedy we just talked about. In this story, a girl pretends to be a guy. The audience knows she's a girl, but the other characters don't. And while she is acting like a guy, another girl falls in love with her, and she falls in love with a man. So it's a situation that is just so hilarious that it sets it up for all sorts of comedic moments. And the audience knows what's happening, but the characters inside the play don't. So this is really great. And there's actually a modern movie called She's the Man based on this play. And you can see in a modern setting what this would look like. And it's pretty funny. There's definitely some situations that are funny. The next type of irony is called situational irony. This is probably the most common definition for irony, probably the first type of irony that you learn about. It's when the opposite of what is expected happens. So here are some basic examples. A fireman's house burns down. You wouldn't expect that a fireman would have his house burned down. A math teacher forgets how to count. Again, you wouldn't expect that to happen. It's the opposite of what you would expect. A helmet blocking your vision causes you to get hurt. Normally you put on a helmet to be protected from getting hurt. Instead, you put a helmet on, it causes you to get hurt. Some more complicated examples might be like this. In order to live longer, I decided to exercise and eat healthy food. While I was out jogging, I was hit by a bus and I died. Not a great story here, but a good example of irony. You're out doing these things so that you can live longer, and those things are actually what cause you to live shorter. Here's a great example. I feel badly for people who don't understand grammar. The reason why this is ironic is because it's a sentence talking about feeling bad for people who don't understand grammar, but the sentence is incorrect. You don't feel badly for people, you feel bad for people who don't understand grammar. If you're feeling badly, you're bad at feeling. So you would be like, I am no good at feeling for people who don't understand grammar. The sentence doesn't make sense the way it's written. It's a common mistake to say I feel badly for people, but especially if you're talking about grammar, you shouldn't make a grammar mistake. So the correct sentence would be, I feel bad for people who don't understand grammar. Just to clarify that. This isn't a lesson on grammar, but that's an ironic statement to mess up a sentence while you're talking about grammar. There is the third type of irony that we're going to talk about is, like I said earlier, a little bit controversial. Some people don't like to call this irony because mainly it's sarcasm. It's a kind of irony that is when you say something that you don't really mean. And some people will argue that sarcasm is not the same as irony, and that's fine. We're not going to get into that debate. I'm just going to explain what it is and show some examples. So verbal irony is when you say something and you mean the opposite. We see this most in sarcasm when you say something like, I really love this long cold winter. I wish it would just go on through July. If you really don't mean that, then that would be an example of verbal irony. You should definitely try touching that. I'm sure it'll be safe, right? So again, saying something that you don't really mean would be an example of verbal irony. And Usually it's said in a sarcastic tone. Some people would argue that sarcasm is not the same as verbal irony. So like I said, I'm not really going to get into the details of that debate, but just so that you're aware of that type of irony. So a quick recap. When an audience knows something and the characters don't know, that is dramatic irony. When a situation is reversed, or it's the opposite of what you would expect to happen, that would be situational irony. And when the speaker says something and they mean the opposite, that is verbal irony. I hope that this lesson about irony has been helpful for you. Have a wonderful day.